We have quite a few people here today, and people are still coming in, almost 62 people. So welcome to the Effective Management of Conflict webinar. I hope you can hear me clearly. Everyone can hear me clearly. Maybe one or two people can just come on group chat and tell me. Yes, Abigail, thank you very much.
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
And you can see the slides as well, right? Great. Okay, so welcome to it. And because of this big attendance, I'm sure this may be a topic that's kind of, I won't say popular, but topic that's something we're always on the top of our mind sometimes, right? Because conflict is kind of something that's common throughout, whether it's at home, whether it's at work. We will always see conflict as long as we have diverse ideas and diverse perceptions and thoughts, okay? So feel free when you come in, we're going to use the group chat a lot. So come in and put in your name and where you're from and how you're feeling. So we also get to know a little bit about you. The other thing is we're going to try to keep it as interactive as possible. So feel free to come on group chat, even come off mute if you need to share something or to even ask some questions. So on your phone or tablet or notebook, go to your web browser and type in, you may be familiar with this, it's called Mentimeter, www.menti.com. And along the way, we'll have a couple of kind of polling going on and to get your sense for what's happening within your organization as well. Okay. So please mute yourselves, right? We're all, I think a lot of us are at home. A lot of us are probably have a lot of distraction back and forth. So you keep yourself mute to minimize background noise, but do feel free to come online if you feel we need to do that, okay? So this is going to be for an hour, and hopefully I can get it done in an hour because conflict is a very wide topic. All right, so let's get going quickly here. Right? Okay. So just to give you a quick breakdown of who I am, my name is Sanjay Mehta. Call me by my first name, Sanjay. I'm an exam consultant and an executive coach, and I'm focused a lot on leadership development. I am with a company called Enable. Right? Some people call it Enable, right? It's an acronym actually for enabling, excuse me, enabling innovation, business, and leadership excellence. Okay? My co-conspirator in this whole business is Raymond Thomas. Some of you may have met him before in A-Star as well. He does a lot of programs around there. So he'll be coming on next week onwards, right? To take on the other webinar as well, right? So if you feel free to connect with me. I'm not going to share too much. I have about 20 years of corporate experience, mostly in the IT world. Spent a fair amount of time out of the 20 years in Microsoft. Microsoft was around 10 years before I left in 2009 to start my own business, right? In consulting, in human resource leadership, talent development consulting. So it's been about 11 years doing this. Enable has been around for about 3 years. So Raymond and I came together about 3 years ago to form a company called Enable. And we've been doing leadership and talent development since then. So July was actually our 3rd year anniversary, right? I won't share with you much more, but if you feel like you'd like to connect, feel free to do so. My LinkedIn profile is there. The QR code will help you to go get there. Okay. So today we're going to talk about managing conflict, right? And conflict is something that we tend to shy away from a lot, okay? And culturally, sometimes also in our region, we tend to avoid conflict. But unfortunately, avoiding conflict may not be the best option all the time, okay? Because avoiding conflict means that we don't resolve issues, we don't develop trust, we don't collaborate better. So it's important for us to understand, right? Why do we avoid conflict and how do we try to manage conflict in a different way, okay? So today we will talk about how we can manage conflict more confidently, okay? And work towards a win-win situation, right? Because a lot of times is when in conflict, we're either losing or somebody else is losing. And that doesn't help in terms of relationship. And that doesn't help anything in the future as well, okay? So I'm going to share with you a very simple model. It's simple, but it's quite effective. It's called the Thomas Kilmann's conflict handling modes. And I'll share with you, there's actually an assessment that goes with it. So if you're keen, you can look it up, right? Google it. And there's an actual assessment that actually goes with to understand what is your default conflict style, okay? But we will do that exercise ourselves as well. But even though you have a default conflict style, it's important for us to learn to apply the other modes because the other modes may be necessary in different situations. Okay. Yeah, I will give you the code later on. Somebody says, yeah, good. So as the slide comes in, the code will be there and you can punch in the code then. So let me ask you this, and you can come to group chat. As I said, I use a lot of group chat. Complete this sentence. Conflict is. Anybody like to complete this sentence? You can come to group chat and do that. Okay, disagreement, great, all right. Difference of view. Okay, we have another disagreement. Mismatch of expectations, right? Okay, great. Miscommunication, okay. Clash of ego, okay, right. Preference to fight, okay, some people have a preference to fight. Misunderstanding, okay, right. So we have many, many words for conflict, right? Conflict has multiple ways of coming together, right? And this is one of the things that you come together. When you look at each one of them, when the communications don't match, when there's understandings don't match, right? I like what Andrew has written is an opportunity as well, right? So we have to think about it, right? Conflict can be an opportunity because new ideas are being brought forward, okay? Passive aggressive, right? So there's passive aggressive behavior as well, where people in front of you agree, but then actually they don't do anything, okay? Don't feel like justice is being done, okay? So you can see it's always something that differing. And when we are different individuals, there's always going to be something that's going to be different for us, okay? So just very simply, right? If you have to think about conflict, right? It's the fact that there's this difference from one person to another. Our concerns, our desire, right? In any situation, we have something that's different from each other. Okay? So that's what it boils down to. So what we need to do is to understand the other person. I think the more important thing is developing empathy and understanding where they are coming from helps us to manage that conflict. Okay. Now, is conflict good or bad? I don't know if you have the thing on your Zoom where you have a thumbs up or the thumbs down, but if you don't, you can come to group chat, right? Is conflict good or bad? So if you say good, you can type in good. If there's a thumbs up, we don't have the thumbs up icon, I think, on Zoom here. But if you do, right, you can use that. What is it good or bad? Good and bad. Okay, some people say good and bad. Okay, so when is it good and when is it bad? It's neither good or bad. Okay, can I say it depends? Yes, you can say it depends. That's well done, right? Good. Right? Guna says it's good. Okay, so you see, we always think of conflict as can be good and can be bad. Right? Many people do, however, do think that conflict is bad. Okay? But it actually, like you said, it really depends. And what does it depend on? Okay, it all depends on the management of the conflict. If we manage conflict effectively, which is what's important, right? We will get a lot of things. You can see the number of increase there. Good understanding, our cohesion increases. It increases our trust, right? It also helps us to know ourselves better and to know others better. However, if not managed effectively, it becomes bad. Okay? Quickly, it becomes very personal dislike. Now, this is where the problem arises. The conflict may be over something very simple, but because we didn't manage it, it becomes personal dislike. The moment it reaches that emotional state of personal dislike, we tend to stop talking. We tend to oppose everything the other person do just because we don't like the person. Teamwork breaks down and people get disengaged, right? Okay, and there's a lot of negativity, right? So it is good and bad. The question is, how do we manage it? Right? So I'm going to send you to the Mentimeter poll, right? And so you can share with me, what are the causes of typical conflict situations at the workplace? Okay, so you can log in on your browser to www.menti.com, whether you're on tablet or whether you're on phone or even on your computer, and use the code 179264. Okay, and then I will flash the screen as the answers come in. Okay, so give me 1 second for that. Okay, what are typical sources of conflict? Causes, sources. Okay, I hope you can see the screen. Yeah, we are getting a lot of this input from everyone. Thank you. Wow, ego stands out very big there. So it looks like a lot of things around ego. Okay, we got a lot of different ones coming in. Work style, jealousy, insensitivity. Lots of different things, right? But you can see now, the ones that are standing out, right? The ones that are standing out are repeated. Ego stands very, very strong there, right? Different expectations, misunderstanding, pride, work style. Wow, many, many different ones. Okay, yeah. So you can see that there are many, many typical causes of typical conflict situations at the workplace, right? So the question is if it's so complex, how do we handle it, right? Okay. So it's not about looking at what the conflict is all about. It's actually looking at ourselves, right? How do we manage our conflict ourselves? So this is what we're going to go into and take a look. Okay. I see a lot of input coming in. Very nice. Okay, great. Okay, I'm just going to pause the share here. Thank you for your inputs. Okay, it's good to see you interacting here like this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about conflict. So all those inputs that you put up, right? So this is research done by two psychologists called Bell and Hart, right? And Bell and Hart came up with the fact that typical causes of conflict, they fall into some of these things. So let me ask you this, right? Looking at the conflicts you did, did your conflicts fall into some of these things, right? Okay. So we're always fighting over maybe resources that are shared. Okay. Somebody mentioned earlier working styles. Okay. We also, our goals sometimes, we're not aligned, right? We don't have shared goals a lot of times. This is one of the reasons why conflict happens. Okay. Other than things, perception. Perception is whatever perception people have tends to be their own reality. So they think that, hey, this is the way you are, and you think maybe this is the way they are. So these are the things that we get in the way. Our work pressures, of course, we are very, very stressed. It also causes a lot of conflicts with that. Okay. Now, if our roles are not defined, a lot of times very well, we tend to be stepping on each other's shoes. These are some of the things that come into that. Okay. Other things can be like, our own values can be very different. Okay. So I may be more of my values may be family. So I tend to go back home much more earlier than others, right? So this one also can be a source of conflict. Okay. And of course, if policies are also not etched out in stone, and we understand these are some of the things that happen, right? So these are typically conflict, and maybe a lot of your conflicts will fall into some of these things, right? Okay. So different values, different perceptions, these are some of the things that we do. So it's important to understand is what are the conflicts, right? What are typical causes of it that create our problems here, right? Oops, sorry, I moved up. So I'm going to run a little video here, right? Just to share with you Thomas Kilmann's model, right? Thomas Kilmann is another psychologist who came up with his 5 conflict mode model here. And I'm going to share with you a video so we can understand a little bit more about how to use this, okay? And I hope you're able to do that. I'll go directly to YouTube so it's easier for you to see as well. Give me 1 second. Okay. If you're not seeing the screen, let me know. Okay, here we go.
The Thomas Kilmann model of conflict management organizes 5 conflict management styles based on 2 dimensions, assertiveness and cooperativeness. People react differently to conflict, or better, conflicting interests. Every style has different degrees of assertiveness and cooperativeness. In other words, how much focus is on your own concerns and how much on satisfying the other person's needs. In any conflict situation, you may respond in one of several ways: by competing, accommodating, avoiding, collaborating, or compromising. The first style I would like to describe is competing. This is the win-lose approach. You act in an assertive way to achieve your goals, without seeking to cooperate, and it may be at the expense of others. This approach may be appropriate for emergencies, when time is of the essence or where you need quick, decisive action. Avoiding is when you simply avoid the issue. You're not helping others reach their goals and you're not pursuing your own. This works when the issue is trivial or when you have no chance of winning. It is also very effective when the atmosphere is emotionally charged and you need to create some space. The style collaborating can also be described as the win-win approach. This can be effective for complex scenarios where you need to find a novel solution. This can also mean reframing the challenge to create a bigger space and room for everybody's ideas. The downside is that it requires a high degree of trust, and reaching consensus can require a lot of time and effort to get everybody on board. Accommodating is when you cooperate to a high degree, and it may be at your own expense and actually work against your own goals. This approach is effective when the other party is the expert or has a better solution. It can also be effective for preserving future relations. And finally, compromising. This is the lose-lose scenario. Neither party really gets what they want. It requires a moderate level of assertiveness and cooperation. It may be appropriate for scenarios where you need a temporary solution, but the trap is to fall into compromising as an easy way out. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
Okay, so I hope that video gave you a little bit of idea around Thomas Kilmann's conflict handling modes, right? So the key thing there is the fact that every situation maybe demands a different type of a conflict handling scenario, right? So what happens is that you have to develop the skill. So depending on the situation, we use a different type of skill, all right? So your conflict mode comes from your skill as well as the situation that you are working on where the conflict is happening. Okay, so but the two things that are very important is what we call assertiveness and cooperativeness. The model is based on these two primary kind of modes of engagement with people, right? Whether we are assertive with the task that we do or whether we are cooperative with the people we do. Okay, now given bringing those two together, right, gives us these 5 conflict handling modes. Okay, so the assertiveness is all about getting your way, right? Making sure that we satisfy our own concerns, right? We satisfy our own goals, we get the things that we want. That's the level of assertiveness we look at. Whereas cooperativeness is all about looking at the other person, right? Whether we can satisfy the needs of the other person. Now, as you can see, right, one is on the y-axis and one is on the x-axis. If you bring those together, right, there are different combinations, right? When we have low and low, there'll be one mode of engagement. If it's high and high, there'll be a different mode of engagement. And with the other combinations also, there'll be a lot of different modes of engagement. So when you are working with conflict, the question is, should you increase the degree of assertiveness or should you increase the degree of cooperativeness? Each one of us will come up with what we call a default style, something that comes up because of our personality, something that comes up because we've been trained that way, right? Or that has been the education system that we've been through. So we have some default style, which is etched in us. Okay? But the question is, can we adjust our assertiveness and our cooperativeness in order to use the other styles as well? Okay. So this ends up with the assertiveness and the cooperativeness. As I said, the different combinations ends up with 5 different conflict handling modes: competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. Okay. And we'll talk about each one a little bit more in detail. As you can see, there was some description of what each one really was. Okay. So I'm hoping that from the video and from what I've shared so far, maybe you have a little bit of an idea as to what is your default style. Okay. Now, your default style can be a couple of things, right? Could be 2, right? It doesn't mean that, okay, you know, this is my primary style. You may have a secondary style. Very unlikely you have a tertiary style because that effect is a little bit less. So when Thomas Kilmann measures the conflict mode, your default conflict mode, right? Generally, 2 styles tend to stand out, okay? So there are 5 different styles, right? And I'm going to just ask you to just reflect on yourself, and we'll go back to Mentimeter, right? Same code. I will need to push the slide down. Hang on a second. Okay. 1 second, I'm just getting the slide going. Okay. And what I want you to do is you'll get two choices there, or you'll get two options, right? Let's think about where you guys stand. Oh, okay. Wow, this is nice. Okay. Quite high on the collaborating side, which is good, right? And collaborating is the win-win solution, right? Okay, but we'll talk a little bit about it, right? What's pros about it and what's the cons with that as well? Okay, we got a lot of collaborating. Okay, you see a lot of compromising as well. Not much competing. Okay, very good, right? Okay, there's a fair amount of accommodation, right? And there's also a little bit of avoiding, right? Okay. Compromise and wouldn't I think Vinod is asking, wouldn't compromise and accommodate is somewhat similar. Okay, so the difference between compromise is more that, you know, we give in some and we take some, we win some. In accommodation, right, we tend to give in to the other person, right? We say, okay, you do it your way. But when it comes to compromise, right, it's like you said, it's win some, lose some, right? I win a little bit and I lose a little bit, okay? So it is similar, but the question is how much the gravity is, right? Whether you've lost everything or whether you've lost only 50% of it. Okay. Wow, this is fantastic. Okay, right. Great, thank you. I think the thing has slowed down a little bit. Right, thank you for sharing. So we see a heavy amount of collaboration, which is great, right? But the question we have to ask ourselves, right? Is there sometimes we need to compete, right? Is there sometimes we need to compete and we need to do that? Okay. There's another good question from Jocelyn. Can you have different primary conflict? Yes. If you remember the slide earlier, I mentioned the skill as well as the situation. So you may have a different conflict style at home and you may have a different conflict style at work, right? It does do that. And then there's a third element where we are stressed out. Our conflict style can change there as well. Okay? So here we are primarily talking about work, but yes, you may be different at home. Okay. Thank you for asking that. All right. Okay. So let me go back to the slide here and then we'll continue. Okay. So as we can see, quite a lot of collaboration, which is good, right? I mean, an organization yourself to be innovative, to be moving forward and trailblazing, collaboration is key. Collaboration is very, very important, okay? But there are some instances where collaboration may not be the best thing, okay? Right? And then Jürgen writes, there is a time to compete, there's time to collaborate. There is a reason why a lot of things done end up being average. Exactly, right? Yes. There is a typo on collaborating. I think. Oh, you mean on the other slide, right? On the Mentimeter, right? Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about when would we use the different conflict handling modes. All right. So can you clarify exactly what you exactly mean your conflict mode? Okay. So I just push back a few slides because we have a question here, right? So the question is this, your conflict mode, it depends on your skill. The skill is your skill of engagement, the way you work together. But the skill changes, right? Each of these conflict modes, handling modes, is a skill that we can develop, right? We have default modes of compromising, of collaborating, but this is the skill. And the skill plus the situation, we apply different ones to the situation. So like somebody mentioned, at home, maybe I apply it differently, right? At work, I apply it differently. So it may be something that's related to your goals, personal goals, and it's being compromised. So you compete, maybe it's because you say, look, I'm not going to give up on my personal goals. But maybe another conflict may be about something else that you're not truly passionate about. It's okay. If the other person gets his way, fine, right? Let me accommodate. Okay. I hope that explains, Prashant. Okay. If not, then we can talk at the back end as well, right? For more of these. Okay. So that's why these 5 conflicting modes are skills that we can practice, right? We can learn how to do that. Maybe one of them we are natural at, like collaboration. But the question is, can we do the others? And in what situations would we do the others? Okay. So let's talk about it a little bit more. Okay. And let's start with competing, right? Now, the one thing we always look about is we want to diffuse the conflict situation, right? So when we are competing, we are not necessarily diffusing the conflict situation. However, when we are accommodating, we are diffusing it. So you can see the diffusion rate from competing all the way to accommodating helps us to, it comes down, right? It allows us to diffuse the conflict. So the question is, what do you want to do with the conflict? Do you want to diffuse it, or do you want to get your way, right? That's the most important thing that you have to understand. Okay. So let's look at competing, right? So let me ask you this. When would you use competing, you think? When would you use this? You can ask in a group chat. In what instances would you use this? Now I'm telling you, hey, sometimes you have to compete. Okay, so maybe I'll give you an example while you guys are even typing in, right? I used to run a lot of programs and a lot of projects within Asia for Microsoft. Right? Generally, my conflict style is a little bit about more collaborating and accommodating, right? I'm more on the cooperative side, right? So you can see collaboration and accommodation actually go towards the right side, okay? So that's what happens. But guess what happens in project room, war rooms and stuff like that? I've been told a lot of times, given feedback that, hey, you have a very competing nature, okay? So I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that's not me. But in a project that is critical and I am accountable for it, I will compete sometimes, right? And say, when's your deadline, right? Why have you not finished? Okay, so I will hold people accountable, and that is actually competing. That is actually competing where I hold people accountable to get things done, right? Deadlines, deliverables, time, that I don't compromise, because, you know, if I compromise on that, then guess what happens? Everything falls apart, and then who's going to get the chop next is me. So in that situation, I will compete. Okay. So when outcomes that you are looking for, winning customer trust, very important, right? Against somebody else. When it's against your values, okay, right? Or if it's a fire, yeah, if it's urgent, you got to get things done. You got to do that. Life or death situation. Yeah, okay, life or death situation, we don't sit down and say, let's discuss what we're going to do about this, right? Let's compromise. You can't compromise half life and half death, okay? So it's important to think about when we will use this. Okay? So understanding a situation, you can apply the skill. I hope that explains, Prashant, right? Okay. So think about what is the situation that you will need in order to apply competing. So for me, it was always about deadlines and all of that. I would always compete. When stakeholders are being a little bit more difficult, and I realized that, you know, the relationship doesn't matter, but I need to get some things done, I will compete, right? I will pull in their bosses, or I will get things done, because it's all about getting things done, okay? Because otherwise things get not done, okay? Right? It's a good question there. Again, competing still need collaboration from team. Maybe I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Amuda, but competing, yeah, as a team, you may compete. You decide to compete, right? We have a lot of sports and stuff. So as a team, we are competing against some people, right? So you may need the support of your team, okay, to do that. Or maybe as an individual, if you're competing against your team as a leader, you need to push down the compliance, or you need to push down the rules, right, and regulations. You probably need to do that. Okay. I hope that answers your question, Amuda. All right, great. Okay. So let's take a look at some of these things. Right? So some of you have mentioned this already, which is all about taking quick action is important. Now, sometimes certain decisions are good, but they're unpopular. Right? So in a lot of the programs and a lot of change management I ran, they're unpopular decisions, but needs to be taken because you need to get something done. So sometimes that's where you have to compete, right? You won't become a saint after that, right? People will not like you so much, which means that relationships will suffer. There is a trade-off to all these things, right? We talk about values, vital issues. You have to impose something. Sometimes about protecting yourself, because if you don't, then you get like I said, if I don't have this project done, my bosses are going to come after me. Okay, right? So that's what is important that we look at, right? So the slogan for this generally is my way or the highway. Okay. So when you're looking at this, it's all about looking at my way, right? Or I'm not going to do it, right? So a lot of people say, hey, this is negative, right? But there are instances where you actually have to use this. Okay. Now, the question is why, right? Why do you have to use this? So the first why is that if you don't use competing enough, right? These are some of the things that will affect you in the future, right? Where your influence isn't there, right? So which means that if I accommodate my projects teams all the time, guess what? Next time they're just going to keep on doing the same thing. They're going to take advantage of me, right? So we don't like to be taken advantage of, right? So this is where restricted influence comes in. So people discuss and discuss and discuss. There's indecision, there's delayed action, okay? And this is one of the things that happens, right? And withholding of contributions. Now, what do we mean by withholding of contributions, right? If we don't use competing enough, we are withholding our contributions, which means that we are not giving our ideas up, okay? And sharing our ideas, okay? So this is why we have to sometimes use that competing. So when we have ideas and we avoid the conflict or we avoid accommodate people, those ideas don't come up, right? Those ideas get stuck. Of course, there are cons of it. You can overuse it. If you keep doing this, if it's a default style and you keep using it all the time, you don't get enough feedback, right? We don't get new ideas, we don't learn. You find that you are the ones making all the decisions. Nobody is empowered to take on decision making, and you may be surrounded by less yes people. Okay, so these are something to think about when you are using competing. Okay. Now collaborating. When would you use collaborating? Under what instances, what situations would collaboration be ideal? Most of you are collaborators, right? A lot of you put your default style as collaborator. So yes, ownership, making sure everyone takes on ownership, okay? You want to get the best solution. You want to get a bigger solution, right? Rather than just solving the things, the smaller symptoms and things like that. Skill set balance, yeah? So we want to make sure we're getting all the ideas from different people. Different people have different skill sets, right? Diversity of ideas, right? We are working towards a goal, right? And of course, yeah, important. This is when things are not urgent. Collaboration can happen when things are not. When things are urgent, collaboration may not be the right start. Okay, getting buy-in. Yeah, so collaboration is to get buy-in. Okay, to offset technology skills and share resources. Okay, right. Okay, include everyone. Right, to be fair to everyone. So you get everyone involved. Okay, these are some of the reasons why we would use collaborating. And 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Thank you for that. Very nice, Chikong, Marvin. Very nice to share, right? So it's all about creating something bigger. Collaboration allows us to move forward and look at something bigger, right? Okay, right. So these are some of the things that you see also in real life, right? In we just had an election, the political fight, right? If we are competing all the time, right? How do we collaborate to make Singapore better, right? That is the next step. So collaboration is to look at a different level altogether, right? It's not about political parties, but it's actually about looking further as well. So, and exactly you guys have shared, so I'm not going to read through this, but it helps us to, right, integrate solutions. We learn a lot, right? Also, it improves relationship. The more discussions you have, the more rapport you build, it improves relationships. And we understand each other. We understand all the interests that we have. And we want to bring all the insights together so there's a richer understanding. Collaborating builds trust. Collaborating builds rapport, right? Which means that it makes things a lot better. And of course, the ideas and the participation is very great, okay? So here, right, we typically call this 2 heads are better than 1. But the other thing is also what we call win-win. This is what we call win-win. At the end of the day, we want to get to a win-win solution, okay? But not all situations will allow us that. So we have to be practical about it. So same thing, right? Why do you use collaborating? I think some of you have mentioned that already, right? It is all about making sure that we get everyone together. So if we don't use collaboration enough, this is where a lot of you share. Low empowerment, low commitment, there's no innovation, right? Okay, and there's no mutual gain, right? However, we can overuse it on trivial matters. So trivial matters, you don't want to spend. You don't want to bring the whole world together to work on a trivial matter. A trivial matter can be resolved maybe just by yourself or one or two people. Okay, this could result in people not taking responsibility. When there are a lot of people, people may say, okay, we are trying to push responsibility, and this is where you may have to change your style a little bit, right? Just to make sure that people are taking responsibility and making sure you're competing a little bit. Now notice that you can actually move from each style. You just reduce the level of cooperativeness. You move from collaboration to slightly to competing. Remember, these are not black and white. Huh? These are gray areas, right? So while we try to create a model so it can fit in our brain, it is not black and white. I can only collaborate and I cannot compete. Okay. You should read a book by Satya Nadella, right? Microsoft CEO. He wrote a book. Now the name slips me, and I really love that book, right? I think it's called a Hit Refresh, right? And in that, he also states, right, Microsoft used to compete a lot. But when he came in, he says, there are times where we can collaborate with our competitors, and there are times we compete, right? And you notice in the last 5 years, there are times where he's collaborated with Apple, but at the times he's also competed with Apple, right? So he says that it is interchangeable, it can be done, okay? Right? Let's look at compromising. When would you compromise? When would you compromise? When would you use this? You can come on group chat and share. The last one was to get the best solution. Okay. In compromising, one of the things is you won't get a best solution, right? That's definitely going to happen, right? Okay. When you have to compromise, right? Which means the other party is probably not moving, not budging, and like, look, I need to get this moving somehow. That's when you may compromise. Okay. Chances of winning is slim, or the risk is high. Like I just said, Sharon, thank you. Just to get the work done to move. Okay. Right? When at least they are. Okay, so the end result is acceptable. So which means that we may not be getting what we thought we were getting, but we're getting something that's workable, that's getting things done. Now, relationship may be more important than the loss. So we say, let's maintain some relationship. Okay. Spirit of achieving the goal. Okay. Okay, good one. I think Jun Long says, when we are not the final decision maker, we may have to some compromise, right? And especially if the other party has a higher rank than you. You may have to give in, right? Compromising is very, very hard in that whole thing. Okay, exactly. Thank you, Daryl. Your counterpart is your boss. Okay, so that's one of the things that happens, right? And to progress as per schedule, right? So compromising a lot of times will happen. So if you notice the conflicts of the world, right? Whether it's the Middle East conflict or the Korean conflict, everything, all these conflicts are based on compromise because everybody is holding stakes on each or the different side. And they're not willing to come together to create collaboration, right? They're still fighting over land. They're still fighting over peace, right? These are some of the things that's happening. So it's always a tenuous compromise. And does the compromise break down? Yes, it does, right? All of a sudden, North Korea decides to blow up something blow up the peacemaking mission or whatever they're building, and decide to blow that up, right? All of a sudden, the Hamas decide to attack Israel. Right, it just doesn't stop because it keeps continuing and it keeps coming, right? Okay. So the other one is, I think Lynn also mentioned, is to have some skin in the game, right? So between, hey, you take some, I take some, okay. Right. So this is where some of the things come in, right? Okay. So you can only reach resolution if you have equal power. Like if you have your boss, I tell you, you are actually not compromising. You're more accommodating than compromising. There's very little you can really compromise when you have people, the other party is somebody of a higher rank or higher status. Okay, time constraints the key. Normally people compromise because we don't have time. Okay, so we want to get things done. So we don't get great conclusions. We get moderate conclusions, which may be fair enough, right? It may work for us. Okay, so these are some of the areas that we want to kind of look at. So it's all about making a deal, right? So this is where we talk about negotiation, right? A negotiation, when we have negotiations, it generally ends in a compromise. When we go into arbitration or when we go into a court of law, right? These are all negotiations, right? Okay. So it's all about making a deal, okay? So you take some, I take some. right? So this is interesting. What the guy in the video says is lose-lose. Yeah, but it's also some win. It's not just complete loss. You've gained something, but the problem here is that, right? Have we really resolved the conflict? Right? Will the conflict come up to bite us again? Okay. So here the same thing, right? Why use compromising? I think if you don't use compromising enough, a lot of confrontations, there are a lot of power struggles, and we are not able to negotiate. Remember I said compromising is about negotiation. If we stand our ground, we can't negotiate. If we give up everything, people take advantage of us. Okay, right? But we can overuse, right? And there is a lot of case studies out there how we have overused compromising because we just want to get things out of the way. Compromising is a tactic to end the conflict, right? It's not a tactic to get your way or get bigger solutions. Okay. So what happens is that trust is still not there. People are still cynical, right? But then we've never achieved with the moderate outcomes. We've never achieved the objective that we wanted to achieve. Okay. So again, it depends on the situation, right? If you feel like, hey, this outcome is good enough, I can work with it, right? Then you want to get the conflict out of the way rather than trying to push, compete, or trying to get people together to get things done. Okay. Right. So as we go down, right, you will see that it becomes a little bit less and less competing and becomes a little bit more diffused, right? Okay. So if you want to diffuse conflict a lot of times, right, it's probably the 2 A's that we use to diffuse conflict. The 3 C's are more for getting things done. But if you just want to get the conflict out of the way and that's it, right? But no worries about whether you get your way or the objectives get done. This is where we go into the last 2. Now, a lot of people say avoiding is bad, right? And to a certain extent it is. But there are instances where you would use avoiding. Where would you use avoiding? Let me ask you guys. When would you use avoiding? If nobody cares about the outcome anyway, from Jürgen, right? Yeah, so if nobody cares about outcome, it's not important. And nobody cares about it, right? Why you want to do? And it's a meaningless argument, right? You're arguing with something that's not going to get resolved, right? So do we even want to do that? Okay. But it's interesting. Avoiding has a couple of good uses as well. When it strains relationship, yeah, you can avoid, okay? You can avoid, but maybe it's more accommodate because you are more concerned. You see the cooperativeness arrow, right? In avoiding, your cooperativeness is also low. Your assertiveness is low. You don't care about anything. You don't care about the outcome and you don't care about the relationship, to be honest. To prevent further loss, maybe you want to stop it, right? Get it out of the way and stop it completely. All right, anything else? Anybody? Now, this is something I noticed that nobody has mentioned here. That to avoid negotiation, to give more time to think. Very good. I was waiting for somebody to say that because a lot of times, like avoiding is not about avoiding the conflict completely, but avoiding the conflict for the time being, buying time. Okay, there are a lot of conflicts that you don't know what's going on. Rather than jump into it, just buy time. Let's do it tomorrow. Let's think about it, right? You need to buy time sometimes in order to do that, okay? Right? So avoiding is all about unimportant issues. Let's not do that. Some of you mentioned, right? Maybe you reduce the tension, but buying time is a key outcome of avoiding, okay? Because you need to understand what you can do and what you cannot do. So you know your limitations. But sometimes you also want to push people to get ownership. Now, I do this a little bit, and people wondering why I avoid. Whenever there's a, in the past, I've noticed myself, I call myself reluctant leader. So whenever there's a project or something that I need to take up, normally people will look at me to take up. I tend to avoid eye contact that time. One of the reasons is I want others to take up, right? I don't want it always to be me. So in a team of peers, I want my peers to take up. Sometimes I want my team members to take it up. So a lot of people say, you avoided that, right? And I say, yeah, I avoided that for a reason. I wanted to see if somebody else would pick it up, right? Pick it up and take ownership of it. So this is where I want to try to allow ownership. So that's a tactic you can use, because if you're always engaged in all stuff, people say, hey, yeah, hey, Sanjay is the natural candidate to do this, and you are always doing it. Okay, so you will do that. You want to avoid people you find troublesome. Okay, and that's it. And sometimes it's symptoms that you're working with, right? Okay? And this is again buying time, right? Okay, because issues are complex. You want to understand them more, maybe bring people together so you can move from avoiding to collaboration and just postponing discussion. Okay, right? And when you feel, of course, somebody also said, when you don't feel it can be resolved. And yes, there are unresolvable conflicts, right? But do we avoid them? So these are unresolvable conflicts tend to generally go into things like third-party arbitration and things like that, okay? Because you've tried everything and it doesn't go there. It's not really avoiding, but probably you've tried everything and it doesn't go there. So now you take a step back and say, let somebody else take over, okay? Right. So the slogan here is, I'll think about it tomorrow, right? So this is one of the things I want you to think about. Avoiding may not necessarily be bad, okay? Certain times you want to do that, okay? So why use avoiding? I think we've discussed it, right? People you find troublesome, issues that are complex, and you want to postpone discussion. But we tend to overuse it, right? When we tend to overuse it, what happens is that issues don't get resolved, okay? You do not give your input, which means that your input is never considered in any of the things there, right? And of course, the issues and you know, people are just very cautious about things, so people don't get involved, right? This is where engagement level goes down, right? So try to look at the issues, the situation again, and decide whether it needs to be avoided or not. If you avoid it, one of the tips I've learned is that when you avoid it and it still keeps coming back, that means that something needs to be done. That means you need to move out of avoiding. Okay? If you avoid it and it resolves itself, great. But there are times when you use avoiding, which is just to buy time to see if it resolves itself. And if it does resolve itself, great. If it doesn't, then you need to move on. Okay. All right. Okay, we're almost coming to the end of our hour already. Let's go to accommodating. Now, when would you use accommodating? Now, accommodating, you can see, is the highest in terms of the cooperativeness, but the assertive level goes down a lot. Okay, that means we don't care too much about the goals or the task. What do we care about here? When you don't feel it can be resolved. Okay, so peacemaking, relationships are important. The person means a lot to you. Okay, when we can be tolerant and patient of things to please the boss. Thank you, Sharon. Right, to please the boss. Yes, a lot of times we have to do that. Okay, the relationship is important, right? Okay, if you need the job. Okay, Nidya says when there's a win-win situation, when you accommodate, right, somebody is losing out. Who's that? You are losing out. So it's actually a lose-win situation. It's not really a win-win. Collaboration is a win-win. You are losing out in some way because you've accommodated. But you taking your point, right? If you didn't care about the issue, it could be a win for you as well, right? Because you look, I accommodated, he's out of my hair, I feel at peace now. So that's also fine. That also could possibly be fine. Okay. So let's look at what we talk about here. When you don't feel it's critical, and losing out is not critical. Yeah. So it may not be critical, right? Okay. So it's all about, as you guys have mentioned, peace, maintaining perspective, right? Sometimes we are opening our boss or opening authority. There are other cases, right, where, and thanks, Chandra, maybe 30-70% win exactly, right? So you may have won in a certain way, right? But generally, this is what they say is a win-lose. So you lost a little bit, but maybe it's okay with you. That's fine. Okay. Deferring to another expertise. So somebody may be more expertise. So in my cases, a lot of times is I accommodate people who I know more than me, or who have more knowledge or have more subject matter expertise than I do, right? This is where I accommodate some of those decisions that they make. Okay, goodwill, right? It's all about sometimes retreating, right? And say, okay, fine. There's too much competition happening. There's too much fighting. Maybe I need to take a step back. This is a negotiation tactic that people use, right? We are at loggerheads. Now, instead of being at loggerheads, let me just pull back, right? And accommodate a little bit. See how the dynamics change. And this is one way people will do that, okay? Right? And Amuda mentions passing the responsibility. So yeah, so we may accommodate and we want to pass the responsibilities away, similar to avoiding, right? So, okay, fine. You have the subject matter expertise. You take on the responsibility, right? You know what you're doing, okay? You want to help someone, you want to work with someone, the relationships are more important here, okay? But sometimes we tend to get too much into the relationship. And this is what our challenge sometimes like. So the comment here is, or the slogan here is, it would be my pleasure, right, to do anything for you, right? But remember, if relationships are important, now this is one of the things when you are working on big projects, you always have this tug of war with your stakeholders. Is your relationship with your stakeholders important, or is the task more important? Okay, because while you may compete and get your task done, but if you sour the relationship, future projects with the same stakeholders might get affected. So this is where we need the balance. We need to figure out, what do I accommodate and what do I not? Okay, right? Wife and husband. So okay, I don't know which side you're talking about, but husbands, you accommodate the wife all the time. Is that right? Or does the wife accommodate the husband? Okay, right? I don't know where that stands. You all can share with me, right? Is it I think that's more of a compromise sometimes, right? We have to compromise, we have to give in sometimes, and we have to take sometimes, right? So those are some of the things that we can do. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's more accommodating, okay? Right? It's hard to collaborate in that situation, I think. Okay, so let's talk about accommodating. Why accommodate? I think we've talked about it. If we don't use enough, relationships are key here. We don't use enough, rapport is an issue, low morale, right? People may think of you as, yeah, you always follow process, you always follow rules, right? You never think about, gray areas. You never think about our feelings. These are some of the things that happen, right? If we are not sometimes accommodating as well, okay? And some people think that, hey, you're just one, you put a stake on the ground and you're not going to do anything about it, right? You're just not going to yield, okay? But this is where we overuse sometimes, right? Where because we give in to somebody, your ideas are not shared. Other people's ideas are not shared, okay? Your influence goes down, okay? People take advantage of you, right? Your contribution goes up. And yes, if you accommodate all the time, right, people will be doing their own things, right? Because they know that you're not going to say anything. Okay? So anarchy could be an issue as well. All right. Okay, so we kind of covered the 5 styles, right? And I will be open to questions, but what I'm going to do is while I'm opening the questions as well, I'm going to ask you to do some reflection, and maybe you want to share a typical conflict situation at the workplace and share what kind of a style you're going to use. We're going to go back to Menti again. Okay. Let me get you back to Menti. Okay. I'm just going to ask you guys to share a typical conflict situation that you face at the workplace, right? What conflict style would you use? That is an example there, right? Just share a little bit about what conflict style would you use. And in the meantime, if there's anybody has questions or more specific questions, feel free to ask me on the group chat. Good one, okay. Right. So I have a question here that says, is saying no considered avoiding or competing? That's a very good question, right? Okay. So if you say no to somebody, right, it's more competing, okay? Because you are disagreeing with the person. It's more about disagreeing. When you avoid, you neither disagree nor agree. So you're not telling anybody no, and you're not telling anybody yes. You're just taking a step back. Okay. I hope that answers your question, Ivy. Okay. Let's see what a colleague refused to execute tasks. You use the compromising style. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Now these are some examples all of you can read, because what will happen is that you'll find out a lot more about what other people are doing, right? Supervisor requests to edit manuscript, accommodated him since he's an expert. Okay, right? Since he's an expert, you probably don't want to touch him, right? Is it okay to stick to values even at the cost of losing projects with stakeholders? Wow, this is a very, very deep question. I can't tell you whether it's good or not, but I will tell you how I feel, right? Okay. So I'm very strong on values. I actually stick to my values, right? So I can't tell you whether you should or not, but for me, my values are very strong. I mean, I learned in a leadership program about values in 2007. And after that, I would never compromise those values. But prior to that, I didn't know my values very clearly. And what happens is I found myself compromising a lot, right? Whatever stakeholders asked, I compromised, right? So which means I was getting things, but I was unhappy. I was losing out. But after 2007, no, right? I was sticking to my values. Did I lose stakeholders? Yes. The stakeholders become difficult with me? Yes, right? So it's your decision, really. If there are conflicts within a team, example, conflict in team members, how do we manage that? Okay. So one of the key things is that conflicts, I think, should never be down, hidden under the carpet, right? If there are conflicts within a team, a good airing out is very important. This is my experience, okay? A good airing out is very important. Not that everybody may speak up, there'll be issues, but it's important to get everybody to air. So which means you facilitate a group meeting, bring everybody openly share. Now, if the conflict has become very, very acute, then you may want to do a one-on-one first to talk to different individuals to understand where they're coming from, okay, right? But if the conflict is something that's not very personal and things like that, you may want to just do an airing out. I hope that's helpful. Okay, as long as it's against your value or unethical, it's a no even to your leader, right? Thank you for sharing that, right? So if it's unethical, right, and for me that is very well. If and I'll tell you, I was asked to do unethical stuff by one of my bosses, okay, and I stood my ground. Luckily, I'd gone through my leadership training before that. I stood my ground. I refused to tell him at the risk of him ostracizing me, which he did, by the way, right? And I decided to leave that division and move on to another division, right? Because he asked me to lie on numbers. And one of my top values is integrity, right? And I told him, if you want to fudge the numbers, here's the slide, you go ahead and do it yourself. And he did, actually. He did fudge the numbers. But then I just absolved myself. I didn't give him the numbers, right? Because the numbers were not showing him in a good light. And it was his fault. But then he wanted the numbers to say, can you change his numbers for me? I said, I can't. It's coming out from a system. How can I change those numbers? Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Cindy. Constant struggle. If you can afford the luxury to walk away, good for you, but that hardly happens in real life to any of us. Yes, it is a challenge. Thank you, Jürgen. It's a very big challenge. Okay. Accommodate when colleague fresher or new to the job, maybe a year or so. Change to collaborate when she can be independent on tasks. Yes. Right. At the beginning, you may want to spend some time, be accommodative. Okay. Some good sharing here as well on the Mentimeter. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down a bit. Collaborate and compromise, other meeting participants. I jump in to make a point, which makes happy. Okay, collaborate. Okay, conflict ideas with boss, accommodate, avoiding, collaborating. Okay. Supervisor request to edit manuscript. Okay, I think I saw that one earlier already. Okay. Okay. Okay, that one's done already. Yeah. Recuse actually uncompromised externals. I just said collaborate and complete. Other meeting participants are happy of some shared result, jump in to point out. Okay. All right. Good sharing there. Thank you very much for sharing, right? Okay. So I hope now from this webinar, you understand that you can vary your conflict styles. Okay. You can try to do different things for different situations. It doesn't mean that we only have one conflict style that we can use. Okay. Now it may be difficult, but it's a skill, like I said, you have to practice it. Right? If we are very people-oriented people, we'll tend to accommodate a lot. Right? I am a very people-oriented person. But I found that when I do that, I get taken advantage of, things don't get done. So I've had to learn, right? At least for temporarily in project war rooms, in meetings, in strategy meetings, where I have to be tough, right? But after I leave that room, that's it, right? I'm back to my normal, right? So we call it flexing the style. We can't be permanently change our style, but we can flex our style by learning the skills that we need to do. Okay. right? You can be independent on the task. Will you be able to share slide deck or recording? Yeah, after this session, I'll be preparing the slide deck and sending it to your people. And I think the next EDM, you'll get the slides, and also they are recording it as well. So you will get the recording. Okay. All right, it's just past 3. Any other thoughts, questions? Let me know. If not, I wish you a great day ahead and also a great long weekend. Okay. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for an hour. I know you're taking 60 minutes away from your work. I hope this has been useful, right? Help you to do that. Okay. Let them do this. Okay, Rachel, you have to do a survey and the feedback. Where's the link for that?
So, thank you everyone for attending this. We would appreciate if you can help us to complete the feedback survey. I will post the link here. Please do give us your comment, your feedback via this link so that we can improve on our future webinar sessions. So please help us to do it before you leave the meeting.
Your feedback is very important. Okay, so because we're always trying to improve these sessions, and let us know what topics also make sense. In an hour, conflict is a big topic. In an hour, I've covered as much as I possibly can. So if there's more that needs to be done, do let us know. And do complete the feedback before you leave for the day, because otherwise you get busy on other things. So another question here is how to handle conflict at the time of appraisal to team. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is actually another topic called performance appraisal, performance management. One of the problems with why conflict happens in an appraisal session is that throughout the year, we may not be communicating enough to the employee or to the staff, right? It's important to have constant feedback, right? Or regular feedback. Because a lot of times we wait 6 months before we give feedback. And that's where the problem happens. Okay. I think, Cindy, I think Rachel, the group can update you. I think there's another session on 6th. Yes, it's by my partner, Raymond. I'm not entirely sure what the topic is, sorry. Here you go. Abigail has just said. It's inspiring team members to interpersonal skills.
Yep, so
Okay,
Cindy,
please.
if you are interested, you can always register for the next session, which the link can be found in our EDM.